we're going to play the Stars and Stripes Forever.
All right. Marvelous. That's more of a visual act, I suppose, in all fairness, to know what's going on. And if someone has turned into our program and caught that in midstream, perhaps it would wonder what was going on. That is called palming, or a manualist, where they take their hands and cup them together, much as you would shake your own hand, and then leaving an air pocket in there, and squishing and squeezing the hands can get a sound. I can't quite do it. It takes great muscular control. In fact, there are only two men in the world that I've ever seen do it, and actually could play a tune. One was my dad, and the other is Bob Hines. That's right. We'll have to get Bob Hines on tomorrow afternoon's music hall program to do a demonstration of manualism. That fellow's name is John Toomey, and it came from a Johnny Carson recording of a number of years ago as he plays the Stars and Stripes Forever. Funny, funny bit. So there you have a couple of opening numbers for this evening's presentation of rare and seldom heard recordings. You probably won't hear them again, folks, here on tonight's edition of Kaleidoscope. And I'll move along, and we'll get into the blooper aspect of recording right after these words from our sponsors. Go with our next portion of this January 18th edition of Kaleidoscope, and tonight we thought we might turn to some bloopers. These are those world-famous hilarious boners that Kermit Schaefer collected, 25, 30 years ago. He initially came out with a 10-inch LP, Pardon My Blooper, and the material on that recording was, in the most part, authentic, although I think there were some instances that were recreated. But it was gathered from kinetoscopes and soundtracks and videotapes and other bona fide sources. It was dedicated as a sympathetic tribute to members of the broadcasting industry who had been the victim of classic boners. And I can recall that Kermit Schaefer, at the conclusion of each recording, would quote a line from Alexander Pope that read, "To err is human, to forgive, divine." And so it is on this next segment of Kaleidoscope as I turn to some of the bloopers, and oddly enough, a few of these were not collected by Kermit Schaefer because they happened right here at WJR. First of all, a local disc jockey who called himself Big Daddy. Do you remember him? And then there is another one that has to do with the present Chief Executive of the United States, Ronald Reagan. Bill Sheehan, newsman and news director for a number of years here at WJR. He got a little tongue-tied one morning with Ted Strasser, and Ted is on hand when he did a Sunday morning hymn show, as well as John Bell, who was a staff announcer here and also a sports announcer, Well, he was giving a newscast one evening and got a little mixed up with the weather forecast. And we'll conclude with that hilarious moment provided by Lowell Thomas on one of his newscasts. I think it was at 6:45 one evening about 5 or 6 years ago. So on this segment of Kaleidoscope, in rare classical radio moments, let's turn to Pardon My Blooper.
Before you answer our first question, young lady, what is your occupation?
I work for the Pittsburgh Natural Gas Company. Over 90% of the people in Pittsburgh have gas.
And so, rock and roll fans, at this low price, all 24 of these great pornographic records can now be yours. I mean, what Big Daddy means is phonograph records. Be a little bird. Join Lady Bug Johnson and help clean up America. Governor Ronald Reagan has arrived at the convention in Miami Beach, where is he... Wait a minute, one more time. Where he is expected to make his personal plea to the GOP platform... I blew it. Where he is expected to make his personal plea to the GOP platform committee.
The Detroit Pistons dropped a game with the Cincinnati Royals last night, 114-99. Tonight, the Pistons and Syracuse play, broadcast time 9:30 on WJR. The weather for Detroit and for all the area, fair and cold. Today and tonight, tomorrow, fair, a little warmer. The temperature now in Detroit is 8 o'clock. Is 8 degrees. Today's high will be 22 and low tonight 17. On the sports scene, the Detroit Pistons were beaten tonight by the Cincinnati Royals in the first game of a twin bill played at
Sportsman John Bell.
Garden. In that one, the Cincinnati club came away from a halftime deficit to pour it on in the last half, with the final score in that one, the Cincinnati Royals 121, the Pistons 101. Now the weather outlook for Detroit and vicinity. Colder tonight, fair skies forecast, but becoming warmer tomorrow, Thursday night, or rather Wednesday night and Thursday. Meanwhile, the outlook for Friday, high winds followed by high skirts, followed by me. Hey, I lost everything. What'd you do with the weather?
Good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, and welcome once again to our little hodgepodge of music, musings, and miscellany. I'm Jack Harris, here to do a little singing, and we have Jimmy Clark, the boys in the damn band, in the band there to do a lot of...
And also be made partakers of his resurrection. Through the same Jesus Christ our Lord.
And from Ted Strasser to Lowell Thomas.
Now, have you a few more unforgettable words?
About a new book called Diet or Die. Author, Mrs. Celesta Geyer, perhaps better known to millions of carnival fans as the one-time Dolly Dimples. Remember, the world's most beautiful fat lady? That was the billing Mrs. Geyer used when she weighed 555 pounds. Count them, 555 pounds. Now it's felt 122. She tells in her book how she did it, following the advice of a doctor who told her after a near-fatal heart attack to diet or die. The secret of effective weight loss, massive willpower, said Mrs. Geyer, adding that her own willpower was strengthened by the memory. Well, anyhow, she said that her fat friends from Carnival Life died at an early age, later buried from the back of a truck. Those are her own words. Why truck? Because in Mrs. Geyer, they were too big for a hearse. Oh, gosh.
Something to keep you moving right along with a few chuckles on this evening's rare and classic radio moments. I suppose if there is anyone that I should thank, or that any of us should personally thank for the various collections of rare recordings that have been obtained over the years, I suppose that vote of thanks goes to Tom Edison. Of all Edison's inventions, the phonograph was his favorite. It was an absolutely fresh idea, so unheard of, in fact, that Edison himself later said, "I don't have much faith that it would work." When it was nearly finished, a fellow by the name of John Cruesi, who actually built the device on December 6th, back in 1877 from Edison's sketch, asked what it was for. I told him. He thought it was absurd. Yet the phonograph was the only one of Edison's inventions that worked on the first try. Now, the tinfoil onto which Edison recorded man's first mechanically reproduced voice gave way to wax and amber roll cylinders, thick flat diamond discs, and finally thinner electrically recorded discs. Whatever the surface, Edison's recording studios turned out marvelous reproduction in those acoustical and early microphone recording days. So excellent were his diamond discs played with a jeweled stylus that famous opera and popular artists tour the country in tone test recitals, singing before audiences who by all accounts could not tell the difference between the actual performer and his records. The full range of these unique Edison selections have been captured faithfully in a new and revolutionary electronic process developed by the recording companies over the years. This remarkable approach brings to the listener an extraordinary and overwhelming experience never before heard. And so I'd like to play a few of these historical records from our archives and things that I've collected over the years. I think you'll get kind of a kick out of a number of them because they date way, way back. So far back, as a matter of fact, that we had no way of knowing that these things were actually available and obtainable, and these voices that had been recorded. Now, first of all, let's start off with a genius himself. There is a popular recording, or a recording that attained some popularity, supposedly the first recording by Thomas Edison, where he quotes, "Mary had a little lamb." However, this is a very rare recording, and it goes back to approximately 1877. I don't know specifically if that's the correct date, but it's explained for us on this old recording that I collected a number of years ago, and it must date, somewhere prior to the turn of the century.
The modern world we live in is a world which Edison created. He brought us light and speed and joy, knowledge and education. No other single man has ever benefited mankind to such an astounding degree. He gave us the electric light, which brightens our houses and illuminates our streets. The electric trains, which carry us in comfort and cleanliness throughout the country. The dynamo, which drives our machines. The phonograph, which is not only a source of wonderful entertainment, but also permits us to leave permanent records of the past and the present for future generations. He invented the motion picture and the first voice writing machine, and his inventions may be counted by the score. There is no realm of human endeavor which has not benefited through the things which Edison created. Although Edison was the most amazing genius America has ever produced, yet he was a simple, kindly, and unaffected man, a true friend. He had generous heart, full of warm humanity. He loved a joke and delighted to tell one. Being associated with Mr. Edison since 1888, I asked him one day in 1906, as head of his recording division, to tell me one of his favorite stories. I was successful in recording it as he spoke, and therefore you, today, are able to hear that same story now, amplified and modernized. I present my former chief, Thomas A. Edison.
Say, Walter Miller, did you ever hear this story of this California story? About 25 years ago, a man from Boston who was a furniture dealer had a very bad case of liver complaint. So he went to California and rigged out a team and started down the San Joaquin Valley with the idea of testing all the mineral springs that were in that valley so that it might relieve him of the terrible pains he had from his liver complaint. Well, he traveled down the valley for the whole summer and he had no relief. But towards the end of the valley, he came to a spring and it amazingly relieved him of his pain. Well, he was a very wealthy man, so he started a sanitarium and sent the circulars all over the world, and by and by there were people who came from all parts of the world and stayed in the sanitarium, and their liver complaint was cured and they relieved of their pain. Well, about 20 years afterwards, the man died. And at the coroner's inquest, they had to take his liver out and kill it with a club.
Tom Medicine, and that recording that, as I've stated, dates back prior to the turn of the century. We'll go back even further right now, for this perhaps is the oldest and most unique recording that I have in my collection. Edwin Booth was born at Bel Air, Maryland, November 13th, 1833. He was the son of the great English actor Junius Brutus Booth, whose later career was almost entirely in America, and the brother, of course, of John Wilkes Booth, the assassin of Abraham Lincoln. He made his debut in Boston in 1849, playing a small part to his father's Richard III. After extensive touring in the West and in Australia, he was hailed on his return to New York as the greatest of American actors, and since his death, only the brilliant but erratic John Barrymore has seriously challenged his position. After Lincoln's death, Edwin Booth went into retirement for over a year, as public feeling ran so high that for a member of the assassin's family to appear on the stage would have been dangerous. He returned on January 3rd, 1866 as Hamlet, and though the first night must have been an agonizing experience for both players and audience, he triumphed. He appeared in London in 1861 and 1881, but the most memorable performance he gave in England were in the production of Othello at the Lyceum in 1882, when Ellen Terry was Desdemona and Booth and Irving alternated parts as Othello and Iago. The recording of the speech to the Senate is taken from a cylinder made in 1890. The sound, of course, is primitive, but it has been my experience that with a text in the hand, which you don't, I realize, have at your disposal right now, there is no difficulty in hearing even subtle inflections. The voice itself has a grave, dignified beauty, and apart from the odd words such as process, it shows very few traces of an American accent. His farewell performance was as Hamlet, his most famous part at the Brooklyn Academy, April 4th, 1891, and he died only 2 years later on June 7th, 1893. So there's a bit of a brief biographical background to Edwin Booth, and I would like to play some of this recording for you right now. I won't play it all because, as I've said, it's not the best quality, but nonetheless you will have evidence at hand of the date of the recording and to hear the voice, and this is the most amazing part, to think that we can hear the voice of the renowned actor Edwin Booth.
Little shall I take the farm, yet by your sweetest sweetest I will arouse untarnished gazes of the whole force of nature. What blood, what charm, what conjurations, and what mighty magic for the species of my cast it on, I was not. Her father shall what excited me. You question the story of my life.
You may not find us on your TV, because in case you did not know, we're being brought to you on. Brought to you on. Brought to you by RADI. Oh.
Well, the Scott Joplin craze has come and gone, and there remains an innocence and somehow a classic perfection of those rags of his that quite transcends the word craze. When so astute a music critic as the New York Times' Harold C. Schoenberg writes that it was impossible for him to leave the theater without humming the theme of Tremonish's Real Slow Rag. And when classical pianists play the Maple Leaf Rag at concerts in Lincoln Center and at various other locales throughout the country, it argues for a staying power of a composer of parts. Unquestionably, there is still a great deal of research to do with Joplin's life and Joplin's music. More questions remain unanswered than otherwise. The simple questions of his birth year, for instance, or his life after living in Texarkana remain elusive. As of the date, There has been no biography of him ever written, probably because the information about him is so terribly slim. And the lack of hard information has quite naturally given rise to invented stories about the man and his music of the ilk of Beethoven's countless mythical romances. But like Beethoven, Scott Joplin left his music. And of course, so many of us have heard those ragtime favorites ever since the motion picture The Sting and all of Scott Joplin's manuscripts. However, there remains one thing to listen to, and that is Scott Joplin himself. Now, a recording, naturally, was never made of his playing. That is, Joplin seated at the piano with microphone at hand to record his sound. The next best thing, however, is a recording, this one done in the way of taking the microphone, placing it next to a piano player with the piano roller. And so it is with this piano roll of Scott Joplin at the keyboard, playing something that was known as the Gladiola Rag. Antique piano roll that was on hand, and we recorded that to get the flavor of what Scott Joplin sounded like so many years ago. In the art of singing, there are two great names in the world of show business that weren't actually known for their singing. During the 1920s, the name of Rudolph Valentino would cause shrieks and actual signs of adoration from the female-going motion picture public, and of course the name of Irving Berlin, who brought us better than 1,000 popular songs. And we think of God Bless America, as well as All Alone and White Christmas and What'll I Do? Well, we have a couple of recordings for you right now that come under the title of Rare and Unique, as we hear both these performers, actually performer and composer, bringing us presentations that are indeed from the library of rare and classic recordings from the world of radio. Let's turn to, first of all, the voice of Rudolph Valentino. Valentino, sung in English, the Kashmiri Love Song. The date of that recording, back in 1923. Here is another rare recording right now as we approach the hour where we're just about ready to say goodbye to you all, but I wanted to get this recording in because I think it typifies some of the rarities that we've collected down over the years, and certainly this is all of that. Irving Berlin, not known for his singing ability, and there are only 2 or 3 songs or 2 or 3 pressings made of his voice. I think one is Oh How I Hate to Get Up in the Morning, where Berlin strives to sing, and this one I think was made a year or 2 later after that 1942 production where Berlin finally realized I don't have a voice, so this is more or less a recitative. We tip our hats to this great composer. If there is one man that typified America, it was Irving Berlin, and he did it in song with so many marvelous compositions, from Mr. President and Annie Get Your Gun and Call Me Madam, and so many of those songs that we'll remember. Irving Berlin.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. But what can a songwriter say? What can a songwriter do? I wish I could make an appropriate speech, but speech making simply is out of my reach. So what can a songwriter do? What can a songwriter say? A fiddler can speak with his fiddle. A singer can speak with his voice. An actor can speak with his tongue in his cheek. But a songwriter has no choice. Whatever his rights or his wrongs, he only can speak with his songs. So, Al, let me say it with music, and I leave the speaking to you. And each time you say it with music, here is what I'd like to do. Let me sing a Berlin song with simple words that roll along. If my song can start you smiling, I'm happy, oh, happy. Let me sing a sad refrain, a broken heart that loved in vain. If my song can start you crying, I'm happy. Let me croon a low-down blues that'll lift you out of your feet. And if my song can reach your shoes and start you tapping your feet, I'm happy. Let me sing of Dixie's arms, of cotton fields and Nanny's arms. And if my song can make you homesick, I'm happy.
And there you have the voice of Irving Berlin with What Can a Songwriter Say, to follow by Let Me Sing a Berlin Song, is done by Al Jolson. And the younger people who are joining us tonight, Al Jolson, you can ask your mother and father who Al was. He was sort of a old Billy Joel, Barry Manilow, Tom Jones, Neil Diamond, all wrapped into one. We'll have a final comment on this evening's program and a preview of tomorrow night's show following these final words from our sponsors. That, good people, is going to do it for this Monday evening's get-together on Kaleidoscopes in 7:15. We've been highlighting what I called rare radio classics, some of the funny things from Funny Bone Alley, as well as those historical moments, and there are a great many others. So if you'd like another show, say next month sometime, we'll get to many more of these recordings that I hope you've enjoyed. Meanwhile, we invite you to stay tuned now for the latest news, and I'll be back tomorrow night. On Tuesday evening's fare, what we have scheduled, by and large, the program is devoted to a great man of literature of America's past, with many excerpts from his works, the story of Edgar Allan Poe. So join me tomorrow for that, as well as other features, on our Tuesday evening get-together of Kaleidoscope.
From the Golden Tower of the Fisher Building, this is WJR Detroit, Radio 76.
It's 8 o'clock, Farmer Jack savings time. Time to save on Spee's fresh, chilled, pure apple juice. Half-gallon carton, just 99 cents at Farmer Jack's.